Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1, Good Vibrations. I'm going to show you an antenna that I just dreamed up in another one of my little nightmares, inspired by a particular viewer, actually, who we had several emails exchanged. I offered him a little bit of advice on one of them and told him I didn't have a clue on the other one, but I think this is an interesting idea, and I'd like to present it to you. This is an antenna that can be used on any band from 20 meters all the way up to 10 meters. And it will work as a vertical antenna. You can see the orientation, and you can see by the lengths of the two sides that this is a half-wave dipole antenna on 20 meters. Maybe 16.5 feet, depends on whether you prefer CW or single sideband. You might suspend this part from an overhanging tree branch, and this part anchor down to the ground. Of course, you'd want to have little insulators and a little bit of wire on either end. You wouldn't want to directly connect these things to the tree in the ground. So you might need a 40-foot tall overhanging tree branch. Those are pretty common in lots of parts of the world. Or you could have a 40-foot tower and mount this a little ways away from that, or put in a beautiful aesthetic 40-foot creosoted utility pole in your yard, which I'm sure would please your spouse and your neighbors to no end. In any case, a vertical dipole antenna cut for 20 meters fed with ladder line or open wire line, usually having a characteristic impedance of 300 or 450 ohms. You can purchase that kind of line online from a variety of suppliers. So there's another variant called window line, which is not quite as good as true ladder line, but almost. Don't worry about the standing wave ratio here. Disregard that completely, whether the impedance match. This is essentially a random dipole fed with a length of open wire low loss feed line. Now on 20 meters, as I said, a half wavelength. On 10 meters, this is going to be a full wavelength high. However, a half a wavelength here and a half a wavelength here, but they will be in phase, two half waves in phase, so the current distribution will look like that. You might call this a double ZEP antenna, a vertical double ZEP on 10 meters. On 20 meters, the current distribution would look like this. A regular dipole, maximum current at the center. On 10 meters, minimum current at the center. But in any case, the maximum radiation and response for this antenna would be in horizontal directions. All horizontal directions. Left, right, towards you, away from you, and all around. And the lobe would be quite narrow at 10 meters and quite a lot wider on 20 meters, but the fact that the feed point is elevated at least a quarter of a wavelength above ground on all bands 20 meters and above will result in a low angle of radiation no matter what band you choose. The only thing is that on 10 meters you're going to get sharper lobes, sort of like that. Directional lobes would look like that. Whereas that's on 10 meters. On 20 meters, it will be much fatter. Of course, the part that goes down is going to be kind of irrelevant because you're not going to be getting any useful signal radiating into the ground, but you will, reflecting back off the ground, some of that will contribute at various angles of radiation. The reflected wave plus the direct wave. Sometimes at certain angles they'll do better than at others. But what about the bands in between 20 and 10 meters? The 17, 15, 12 meter bands. On those bands, you're going to have something between a half-wave dipole and a full wavelength center-fed antenna. But in any case, maximum radiation and response will always be in the horizontal direction. The lobe will just get narrower and narrower as you get higher in frequency. So, as a result of that, this antenna will perform very well on all bands 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. And of course, you can go ahead and try to feed it on other bands. It'll work after a fashion as a dipole, a shortened dipole, on the 40 meter band, but not terribly well because it will, after all, only be a quarter of a wavelength long overall. And the feed point won't be high enough off the ground for optimum antenna performance. So I put that in parentheses. 30 meters, same deal. It'll work, but it'll be a little bit shorter than a half-wave dipole. Now, if you get up above 10 meters onto 6 meters, you're going to get longer than a full wavelength, and the radiation pattern will be more complicated. I'm not sure exactly what it will be, but it certainly will accept power, and you'll certainly make contacts. But it is not optimized for that band, so I would have to say 6 meters in parentheses as well. Little bit of fodder for the brain there on a Sunday night, September 17, 2017. And leaves are starting to turn a little bit here in the black holes of Dakota Toritarian. We had our first frost last night. I knew because the back window of my vehicle was frosted over and I had to run the defroster for the first time. Geez, it's still summer by the calendar and we're having frost. And only a couple of weeks ago, we were swimming in the outdoor pool. I'm always sad on Labor Day to see that. All those happy kids and all that warm weather. Go to a lot of happy kids in cold weather. Well, I guess it's not so sad then. Stan Gibilisco signing off. Proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV. Saying 73, and, of course, whatever frequency I use with an antenna like this, so long will always translate to da-da-da-da-da-da.